Welcome to They Are Waiting for Us from Forbes Books, the podcast that explores how education can transform lives and communities, featuring conversations with change agents who are making a difference in education, from parents and advocates to teachers and leaders. Here's Dr. Lisa Andrew.
My guest this week is Dr. Michael Kirst. Michael brings over 6 decades of invaluable expertise and insight to us, having served as the longest-running president of the California State Board of Education. In addition to his pioneering work helping shape education policy for the state of California, Dr. Kirst has had an illustrious career as a professor at Stanford University. With high-level experience across academia, government, and policy research, Dr. Kirst offers a unique bird's-eye perspective on both the challenges and opportunities facing education today. Michael, welcome to They Are Waiting for Us.
Pleasure to be here.
Great. Always wonderful to be with you and hear from your lived experience and also what your thoughts are looking forward. So we are actually going to begin our conversation today at a really high-level view of education in America. We're wondering what keeps you up at night about the future of learning in America?
Well, there's an immediate and long-range perspective. The immediate is, of course, the large learning loss and the large loss of attendance by students due to the pandemic. So estimates are that some groups of students, particularly low income, lost 25% or more of their learning that they would from being out of school. So that is really a serious blow to the level of education that many students have. So that combined with what I perceive to be not a strong response from the public school system to mount sort of emergency and deeply implemented and broadly designed solutions to these kinds of problems. We know such things as high-quality tutoring will help. There's some of that going on. But there doesn't seem to be the kind of all hands on deck that I would like to have seen. So that's the short term. The long term is the perspective from data and also interviews I've conducted that we're getting a lower quality teaching and administrative force entering the field of education, public and private. And are we in some kind of secular trend where K-12 education has lost out to other professions and we're not attracting the quality we attracted when, for example, I began my career in 1964. Of course, a major change from that is the change in role of women and females, and women are about 80% of our teaching force. So you want to look at particularly gender-based issues that might be driving this. So those are the two big ones that I really keep worrying about.
Yeah. While the pandemic was, awful on so many levels, it does now afford us an opportunity to reach across state, reach across the world, because we all experienced this. Students everywhere were at home. So it really could be a nationwide effort towards solution that isn't bound by policy and law and formulas across states, because the majority of students were at home, mental health was at risk, going to work for families was difficult. So this was and still continues to be an opportunity where we could find solution that isn't bound by state lines. So I totally agree with the two things that you raised there, both the short and long term. So knowing that and what you've just shared, while it's been quite a while since education was a talking point on the campaign trail, which might also be part of the issue you were speaking to, why it has lost its luster, what education policy should the next president champion?
Well, let's talk a little bit about why it lost its luster. If you go back to the presidency of George W. Bush and the passage of No Child Left Behind, it was one of his signature programs. Moreover, President George W. Bush had a bipartisan coalition behind his effort. Edward Kennedy and others supported it. I was the advisor to the Business Roundtable, largest companies in America, on how to implement these things and implement new higher standards and so on. And that coalition of business and political and many state governors all has collapsed. And we have no coalition that has replaced it to drive things forward. So you now have, the parties divided, and they're split on all the issues. The injection of a lot of cultural issues, book banning, transgender, and so on, playing into this. And you have two presidential strategies, the most recent, since we're going to have a rematch. In my view, Trump was never really interested in education. It wasn't really something that drove him very much. He appointed Betsy DeVos as secretary, and she was basically interested in choice and privatization, subsidizing private schools and so on, charter schools as well, that are public. And then Biden has provided money, but it's in the same old programs. Title I started in 1964 in Washington, and we passed Title I in 1965. It has its merits, but it's not a new initiative. So you don't have any movement here. I have trouble answering your question because federal aid is only 9% of the total spending. And we have a state and local system for finance. So it's very marginal money. The law called Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, that was signed by Obama, that undercut the federal role in many ways because I think Bush and Obama had overplayed the federal hand given the money they provide. So I don't see that education will be a big issue. Higher education, if we want to talk about that, is different. There, the federal government is responsible for student loans and student debt and the Pell Grants. That seems to be where the action is, not in K-12. Now, what could they do? Well, it's hard to say. I think we're back to what was Secretary William Bennett under Reagan did, the bully pulpit. They can preach, but I don't see them finding big money or big visions that are going to do much in the short range. So we've got to focus, to me, on the state and local systems, and that's really what our Constitution says, that education is a reserved power to the states. For a while, we overrode that. Right now, we're not in that kind of a period. But so I think the next secretary should say things and be a cheerleader, but I'm not sure that I even conceive of a new big program that they ought to have. Generally, I think if I had my druthers now to answer your question more directly, they would focus much more on teacher quality, teacher capacity, provide much more money for professional development of teachers, because all of these reforms lose ground in the last mile, and the last mile is in the classroom. They really don't have the teachers ready to teach to the high standards we have across the country.
Right. It goes back to where you started, the things that are keeping you up at night. There could be this is a national issue around quality of teaching, a national issue around the workforce of teaching and how it's valued, who's in the workforce, how they're paid. Perhaps those things that are keeping you up at night could be huge bipartisan wins, huge impact with policy and funding that could really make a change here locally, but also in just looking at how we're just preparing our students globally. And with that in mind, how do you think that America's education system is positioned globally? Where do you think our position is? We're seen as this leader. We're looked to for aid. We're looked to for so many things. But how is our education system positioned globally, and where must we improve?
Well, when you look at the international studies, and there's different ones, and some of them are doing better on than others, but overall the performance is mediocre. However, that is the way we structure the horse race. We take all the countries We have Malta and Singapore. These have, very small populations, and compare them to places with a big population. It's sort of like writing a review on cars and comparing a dump truck to a compact car. A lot of the people ahead of us, with the exception of some Asian countries, are very small countries, very uniform in population, not much diversity at all. The horse race reporting does not adjust for the socioeconomic background or immigration base of the various countries. So, if you take that into account, I think we're doing somewhat better, but we're not satisfied with where we are. We're about the same as many European countries. I'll put it that way. Out in front are always the biggies of Japan, Korea, Singapore, Taiwan. They just run a different system, which we probably don't have time to talk about. But they're just structurally different. For example, their teachers have a period where they collaborate with each other on preparation to teach lessons. It's just different. So that's, I think, my overall summary.
Shouldn't our diversity be a strength? I mean, shouldn't that we have a diverse culture, diverse thought, creativity? Shouldn't that be something that's actually propelling us forward?
Yeah, by diversity, I meant diversity in income. We have 20 to 25%, quote, in poverty. When I think if you adjusted for the actual cost of living in many places like California, it's way above that. I mean, you can't get by on the national average and live a life in California. I think it's the diversity of the income. The European countries are have less poverty, but they're only, some of them are slightly outscoring us. We're the same as Germany, for example. They're also in the sort of mediocre category. So, yeah, I was really referring to the income issue.
So now let's narrow our focus a bit and let's turn to our beloved state of California, one of the wealthiest states in the Union, home to more billionaires than any other state, home of Silicon Valley and innovation, yet California ranked 39th in fourth grade mathematics in the 2022 on the National Assessment of Educational Progress.
Yeah, if you adjust for our poverty levels, which are much higher than the national average, and you adjust for our English learners, that performance goes way up. Actually, a group called the AIR, the American Institutes for Research, has done study of this and adjusted for that. So it's sort of like if you adjusted...
Can I just pause here? So when you say they adjusted for it, does that mean they adjusted so that you're comparing apples to apples when you're going to states? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
why would they adjust? Yeah.
It would be like a cost of living adjustment where there's a national average, and then if states are above it, you would adjust for the fact that they're above it, and those that are below it, you adjust for the background factors. So you're adjusting for poverty, English learners, things of that sort in that regard. And I'm including English learners as they enter in the first grade, not that we shouldn't be doing better. So the 39th that you're using is not adjusted. Let me stress, is not adjusted for our high costs. They assume that we're lower than that. And let me backtrack, make that clear. The 39th often comes from Education Week and other groups. That factors in some things, but if we adjusted properly, we'd be better.
Right. And I think that this is an important point when I speak with a lot of folks in education and outside of education. We have to look at data and we have to say, are we comparing apples to apples? Not to make an excuse, because I feel like we shouldn't have to. I mean, if we're one of the richest states, home to most billionaires, we shouldn't have any poverty sort of things going on, especially talking about education when it comes to that in our state. That aside, when we look at data to really understand how we're doing, we have to say this matched demographic to this matched demographic. And the demographic you're speaking to here is around income. Then this is where we rank. We also have to look at, in some of the states, in other countries, all students do not have access to education. And so the students that we are being compared to are a subset of their total population. So given all that, and I'm willing to accept that and say that, my stance is always, well, every student should be able to exceed and excel, especially in the state of California. And so, what is our biggest challenge here? What is the biggest challenge facing K-12 education in California today?
I think it's the fact that we have very high standards, which are good in all our English, math, science, and history, civics. And we have not provided our teaching force with the capability of teaching to those high standards. And I think that's shared across the country. I compare it to designing an interstate highway system, which was being built when I was growing up. So what we've done, and this is nationally, we've laid out the road, which is the standards and all the highways and, how they would interconnect. We built the off-ramps and all that, but we didn't do anything with the people that were supposed to pour the cement. And so that's the last mile. The last mile here is the classroom teachers, and are they ready? We just adopted new math standards. Is a typical fourth grade teacher ready to teach those math standards? Is there anything in her or his background that would enable them to meet those standards? No. So what we do is we violate a law which is of balance. And so we push accountability way up, and then we push that way up, and then way down is capacity building. So we don't build in the structure. And it's not just teacher preparation, it's continually upgrading as we go along. So we have no vision and no strategy for that.
Why do we do that?
That's a great question. And we have, and that's what I'm working on as we speak. We take responsibility at the state level, every state, for the certification and standards for the new teachers, for teacher preparation. We have no state role for professional development, capacity building, and no vision as to what the state should be doing. We leave it to the locals. That's my answer. And the locals really don't have the running room to do it. For example, I go back to the international answer I gave. Our teachers on every international study are in front of students longer than the students in almost any other country. They have very little time to work together, to release time to learn things, to plan. You just stand there and teach. These other systems are really designed where there is free time for teachers during the school day, not at home or in the summer to do this. So we need to rethink the system of teacher capacity building and stop piling on accountability and assuming, as No Child Left Behind did, if these teachers just pulled up their socks and worked harder, we would succeed. That was essentially what NCLB said. I think what we found is it's not a matter that they're lazy or they're not teaching. They don't have the capacity to teach to the standards which have been elevated. Our standards in science and math are much higher, English language arts, than they were when I began being state board president in 1975.
Who's standing in the way of us changing the school day then? Who's standing in the way of us giving more time to teachers during the school day?
Well, this is, my latest work. We didn't have the vision or a strategy or a plan as to how to upgrade the teachers and also to deal somewhat more with the teacher preparation. Now, who was the president of the State Board of Education when all these new standards came out? The name of that person is Michael Kirst. So I have been looking back. My new paper is called Meeting Educational Standards, Looking Back to Look Forward. So I look back at my career. What did we do in mathematics? We rolled it out with telling people about what the new standards were. We had not a lot of money and no real state push for how the teachers would gain the capacity to teach. So we need an entirely new view of the vision and role of the state in this. So I think that I was as guilty as all my colleagues and not really figuring this out. And now I have a new crusade, if you will.
I was sitting with a group of associate superintendents yesterday talking about rolling out and the new math framework. Is it really about the framework, or is it really about good teaching and learning? And immediately we come to teacher professional learning. Immediately. I mean, it's like, okay, how are we going to prepare the teachers? So what you're sharing here is very relevant and on point. Then it comes to instructional minutes. The state requires so many instructional minutes for, this grade, that grade. Well, then what are instructional minutes? Time in front of students. Okay. So where do you get, it's at that, and then you get at the crux of negotiating the teacher workday and negotiating professional development days. And it just seems like there's all this bureaucracy has been built around, as you said, these high expectations to where now, folks are just in this pressure cooker of, I think people are well-meaning. They want students to do well. People want to come to work and they want to enjoy their job. They want to have joy in teaching. They want it to be a wonderful learning environment for everyone. But we've just kind of put everybody in this box. And now you're trying to find all these nooks and crannies where you can get in and work within a system that clearly is not working for the students or for the professionals that are working in the system.
You expressed it well, and I agree with that. But if you made me superintendent of a local school district, I might be caught in the same web. And so what we're doing now, there's a group of us in California, and my paper is through the Learning Policy Institute. It's for all states, not just for California. Is to really sit down and build a strategic and detailed plan on how you would do this. I don't know how to do it. I'm not competent enough. I don't know everything to do it. I'm not competent enough in the deep issues of teaching. And so we really need a team, and we have a really good team working on this in California. But there's no strategy. There's no detailed plan to get from here to there.
Right. We're admiring the problem, and now we have to do something about it. And I want to get to how we're going to solve it, but we have to stop here. Next time on They Are Waiting for Us, Dr. Michael Kirst, the acclaimed Stanford professor and former president of the California State Board of Education, will talk about the lack of innovation in education.
So when I went back to my 50th high school reunion near Reading, PA, and I went to the rooms that I studied for math and history and so on, they were the same. There were the chairs. Now, some of them were arranged in little groups. So we've unbolted the big change in classrooms. So when we unbolted the desks from the floor.
This has been They Are Waiting for Us. If you want to learn how to create economic opportunity through equal access to quality education and create an extraordinary learning environment focused on everyone realizing their full potential, go to drlisaandrew.com. They Are Waiting for Us is a production of Forbes Books.